It looks like Earl Grant will be back for another season.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black of Eagle Insider. Thank you all who have made Locked On Boston College your first listen every day. We have a action-packed episode of Locked On BC today. ACC comes to an agreement with Florida State and Clemson to drop their lawsuits, and peace is had, but it'll be a short time. We'll get into what that means for Boston College later in the show. Additionally, Jeff Goodman of the stadium, I believe he's part of. I forget where he's part of, but he says that Earl Grant is going to come back. I'll explain why. Maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong, and if it is, what that means. And if he does come back, what does Boston College need to do to make next year not another lame duck season? Let's get into that. So on Monday, Jeff Goodman, who many of you know from Twitter, he's a very well-known college basketball reporter. He discussed that Earl Grant, along with Gene Autry of Syracuse, Steve Forbes of Wake Forest, and another coach in the ACC, are all Mike Young of Virginia Tech, are all coming back for the 2025-26 season. That noise you hear right now is Boston College fans banging their head on a desk. This is not good news. If this is what's going to happen, a lot of Boston College fans are going to be very upset that this is going to go on for another season. Now, you can say what you will about this year. The roster management was a mess. You lost your entire roster in the transfer portal. Basically, anyone who had played other than Donald Hand and Chaz Kelly were gone. Whether Earl Grant did the right things on trying to get them back, if it was an NIL issue, we won't know the full extent of that because it was all behind closed doors. What I can say is the guys that they brought in didn't do it. Josh Beadle has not been any, you lose Jaden Zachary, who is going to be ACC defense, one of the top defensive players in the ACC this year. You bring in Josh Beadle and he struggled. You brought in Chad Venning, fine, not the worst, but you lost Devin McLaughlin, who is crushing it with Vanderbilt. You lost Claudell Harris, who was your sharpshooter, and replaced him with, I don't know, Dion Brown. I mean, you don't have a sharpshooter like him. So there was a lot of issues with the roster. And so if this is, if this is not an Earl Grant issue, if the roster issue was not his, which I have a hard time believing he did not have a part to that, then maybe you want to give him another year. That being said, I think he had a part to that. He helped identify in the transfer portal what they needed to bring in. It wasn't working. He probably had something to do with some of the guys going out. Like Mason Madsen, he probably wanted to play with his brother. We knew Jaden Zachary wanted to leave. Those white guys were not part of that deal, but Devin McLaughlin, you probably could have kept him. Claudell Harris, you probably could have kept him. Not sure what happened, but you didn't keep him. My bigger issue with Earl is not this season. It's now that you put the totality of what he's done. And the folks that defend him will point to last season and say, hey, AJ, he won 20 games. See, he's good. He's a good coach. He's putting them in the right direction. I argue there is no way that team should have been anything less than a tournament team. You had Quinten Post, who is going to be a mainstay big at the NBA level on your roster. You had Devin McLaughlin, who I just talked about. You had Jaden Zachary. You had Mason Madsen and Claudell Harris, two good shooters to go along with that. You had all this talent, and the best you could do was a second-round NIT, in which you beat a completely undermanned Providence team that you barely beat, and then got beaten by you. Look back at last year and say, that's not I'm sorry. Getting to the NIT is not a success. It isn't. That was a wasted opportunity. That was a chance for you to get to the tournament with a roster that was better than anything you've had in years, and you failed. That's how it should be viewed. You look at what you had and you see all the talent that you have. They should have been. I mean, you go back to some of those Al Skinner teams. Yeah, you had years with like Jared Dudley and stuff, but they made tournaments with far less than what they had last year. So I can't agree that this team took a step forward last year. They didn't. They really didn't. You just had a lot of talent that just performed kind of what they were supposed to, and then they fell off a cliff. So now, if Jeff Goodman's reporting is right and you bring him back, what's next year going to be like? You see, like I'm on 247. I'm putting up. There was a 4-star 2026 recruit that had just got an offer from BC. We talked about Torrey Bryant, a top 10 recruit. Caleb Sanders is a good recruit. What do you think these guys really think about Boston College if Earl Grant comes back? Do they see him as a coach that's going to really, A, be around for a while, or B, going to take this team to the next level where they would want to play? I think the answer is no to both of those. These offers are great, but none of these guys, he's going to definitely, this is about as lame duck as you can be. Like, if he comes back next year, he is in all essence a lame duck. He's going to have no oomph in the transfer portal. He's going to have no oomph on the recruiting trail, because these kids are going to see the difference of where Boston College is, and they've been that way for a while now, and other programs are. He can try to sell it, but he hasn't shown it yet. He hasn't shown that this team is going to go in the right direction. He hasn't shown that they're trending in the right direction. Like, I mean, even if you just look at the plain numbers, even if you don't agree with what I just said about last year, you can look and it'll be like going up, going up, going up. It's like a roller coaster down to the bottom this year. And I mean, I'm telling you right now, I don't know what's going to happen next year, but I'm going to tell you this. I don't know. Like, if Blake James does not pull the trigger now, and yes, I know he has an extension till 2029. What's the difference between this year and next year? A couple $1 million? Look it. In our final segment today, I'm going to talk about this new ACC deal. The clock is going to start ticking with the ACC and what's going to happen to them. Things could change. But do you really want to waste one of those years on a coach that hasn't really shown that he can take you to that next level to make BC relevant again? I'd argue that you can't. I'd argue that what we saw this year was enough. It's time to make a change. And I'm not sure that BC will make a change. For the folks, and I want to address this piece before we get into our next segment. I see a lot of folks complaining about the extension. A lot of folks. And I want to say this. Maybe BC was happy after last year. Maybe they thought, Earl Grant looking good. He's got to be an NIT team. Why they give him an extension? What I just said about the lame duckness, being a lame duck coach, fans hate extensions on every coach that is not Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, Mike Krzyzewski, because you don't understand that, that's kind of part of the game. I know you guys hate it, but they have to do that. If the other, you probably would just say, well, then just fire him. Well, that's not what BC would do, but you can't leave a coach to recruit with 2 years on a contract, because that's setting them up again. That's making them a lame duck coach. So I think the long-term contract extension that they made, that was 4 years, they do that for so many coaches across college sports because of the recruiting cycle. You have to do it. And yes, you don't want to do it with your coaches that are kind of mediocre, but you do it all the time. And so I don't blame BC for doing that. It happens everywhere, and fans hate it everywhere. But that's the nature of the beast. And it's more the issue that BC won't swallow the buyouts on some of these. That's the bigger issue than actually giving them. Because the way that the nature of college coaching should go is you give these extensions, but you should also be able to swallow them because you're going to need it to recruit. But yeah, maybe a coach doesn't work out. You want to cut them as soon as you can. BC has just been cheap about that. And whether they do it, whether the Father Leahy does it or Father Jack does it, I think that's going to be something to watch. In our second segment, what if Earl Grant is coming back? What does he need to do to make next year palatable? We'll get into all that in just a moment. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trade, Supply House. Whether you're plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service. So you always talk to a real person. And for the trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Welcome back. Locked On Boston College, AJ Black here. I want to shout out all of our everydayers, all of you that listen to Locked On BC every single day. You are our MVPs, and I'm glad you're here to talk about college basketball today because I thought it was an interesting conversation to have. If you're done with this, check out Locked On College Basketball with Isaac Shade. You can find that on YouTube or on anywhere you get podcasts. With March Madness, you want to hear what he has to say about the tournament, especially if you're making your brackets. Check that out. Now, we're talking about Jeff Goodman's tweet talking about how Earl Grant, according to his sources, will be back. Remember, he's just one reporter. Things can change. There's still a week left in the season. Things can always be different. And I'm still on the fence of whether this could happen. I still feel deep down that if BC really doesn't believe that he can do it, there's going to be a change. Now, let's take that perspective of Earl Grant being back. And I know many of you don't want to even think of that, just because this year has been just absolutely brutal. What does next year need to be for BC? What does Boston College need to do in the portal to make themselves, back to maybe 2020, not 2020, 2024, where they made the NIT? Like, how do you take a step forward? Step one is you need to retain at least a few of your key players. And looking at this roster, next year you're losing Chad Venning. You're losing you're losing, I think that is it just Chad Venning? Roger McFarland. I think you're only losing those two. But who are you else are you gonna lose in the portal? That I don't know. I don't know who's gonna enter the portal, but Donald Hand cannot. You cannot, like, you don't want to be defeatist in the offseason because obviously games are won and lost on the court. But if Boston College loses Donald Hand to the transfer portal, and I don't know where his mind is at, I can't speak for him. The odds for next year are very, very bleak. Donald Hand is turning into one of the better shooting guards in the country. He's had a rough couple weeks, but there was a spell there where he was averaging 26 points a game. So if you're watching his trajectory, he's going from an injury to part-time to full-time to superstar potentially next year. You got to keep him. Donald Hand, if he is on, could be the guy to help you win some games. So you need to be able to trust him and to have him here. Additionally, you need somebody else to step up on this roster. You look up and down at who they have. Chad Venning was probably their second best offensive weapon that they had, and he's gone. So who could that be? We saw Luka Taves score 12 points, but we also didn't see Luka Taves do much of anything for months. Is he going to be developed enough to do that? I mean, maybe. Chaz Kelly, I'm not sure what he brings right now. Like, he has not been consistent at all. Elijah Strong, he's been up and down all season too. Like, the roster does not have a ton of scoring with it. So that brings up the point. Can you lure in some transfers? And can these transfers be more impactful than what you brought in last year? That is going to be important. And last year, Earl Grant went with two different types of recruits. I mean, transfers. He brought in lower level guys that he thought would transfer up and be okay. Guys like Roger McFarland, guys like Dion Brown. These are, even St. Bonaventure a little bit with Chad Venning. You brought those three in. Then you brought in um, Josh Beadle from Clemson. He didn't pan out at all. And then a bunch of freshmen. So you've been able to kind of try some different things. BC's got to figure out something because you need to bring in a transfer that is impactful immediately. You did it the year before with Claudel Harris. You could do it again. So I would hope that they find somebody in the portal to go with uh, Donald Hand. I look at this team too for next year if Earl Grant is back, and I look at the center position, and I'm worried. Chad Venning has been an MVP there because Jaden Hastings, he's young. He's just young. And maybe he will develop too. Maybe he's a guy that will take that next step. But just having him out there and relying on him, you're going to have to hope that he has a Devin McLaughlin type of ascent. And I'm not sure he can. So you have to be able to get a big. And you're bringing in Jack Bailey, true freshman. He's 6'11". He could be it. And, they've been looking at some other guys. So you've got that. And then you're going to have to, wherever your roster changes, because after a season like this, what we saw with BC last year, there's a good chance there's going to be some more roster spots open. Earl Grant cannot screw around in the portal this year. He has to hit home runs. If he does not get the right guys here, next year is going to be just a repeat of this year or slightly better. And we have seen this, roller coaster of bad to mediocre, but never good enough to make the tournament for 15 plus years now. This is why I go back to, why are we doing this again? What is this doing? Because it feels to me like next year is going to be a lame duck year. And that at the end of next year, we have just wasted an entire year to make a decision you could have made last year. And I hope if this move does get made, that Father Jack gets a chance to be involved with that and not just Father Leahy. I see a lot of folks worried that they'd rather just wait a year because Father Leahy will be gone. He's not gone until next May or June, I believe. So even if you fire him next year, you still got Father Leahy floating around. So I'm not sure what you want to do there. Hope that Blake James is a good advocate for spending some money, I guess. But there's a chance, and that's what I'm laid out what you have to do. I don't see an easy way out of this with Earl Grant here, but that's the path that they're going to have to take. Now, in a moment, we're going to wrap things up with talk about the ACC finally getting some relief and some the teams all kind of gelling together finally. But will it last for a while? I'll talk about that in just a moment. This is Locked On Boston College. I'm your host, AJ Black. This is a daily Boston College podcast. I do this 5 days a week. If you've never listened to me before, I'm glad you're here. If you are part of our everydayer crew that does this while they're, doing laundry or working out, I'm glad you're here to talk BC sports. If you love BC like I do, this is the place to be. Now, the ACC on Tuesday voted to ratify a new change in revenue distribution that puts an emphasis on brand recognition. So schools that have a bigger brand, a bigger imprint in the media world is going to get a bigger chunk of the money. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of this, but this is meant to help out Florida State, Clemson, schools like that, Miami. They're going to get a bigger chunk, while schools like SMU, Wake Forest, and BC are not. I'm fine with that because honestly, making a little bit less in the ACC is okay as long as the ACC is still here. Now, the caveat to all of this is that we're giving into the FSU and Clemson. We're also giving into FSU and Clemson because the buyout numbers gradually decrease till they hit a floor of, I think it's $75 million in 2030, which ironically lines up with the Big Ten ending their media rights deal. SEC is 2034. So that could be we could be starting to click away at the doomsday number of when the ACC could finally actually implode. So good on Jim Phillips for finding a way to keep the crew together for at least another 5 seasons. But now you're looking ahead and saying this could be changing. But you know what? Pushing it out 5 years is honestly not the worst thing. At least the ACC did not do what the Pac-12 would do, because if that was the case, Boston College would be in a world of hurt right now. They now have stability for 5 years. BC can try to get things in a better order. And with football, with Bill O'Brien, I think they are getting themselves in the right shape. Basketball, this is why I talked about this today. You have 5 years to figure this out. Do you want to waste one of that with Earl Grant again? Or I don't even want to say waste. Do you want to try another year of Earl Grant? I got to be, more fair about this. That's where I'm at with this. So you need to get your 2 marquee programs in the ACC, which is basketball, men's basketball and football, at a higher level. And doing that could put you in a better spot. I say with BC, you never know where media is going to go in a couple years. So maybe this 5 years to 2030 gets extended more. Look at what ESPN just did with Major League Baseball. They just cut their contract, the amount of money that they're making, in half. This is a media conglomerate that's been cutting staff left and right. They're sure as heck paying Pat McAfee a bajillion dollars, but they can't pay for actual reporters because I guess personalities are bigger. But the world of sports, these revenue numbers, who knows what they're going to be like in a couple years. Remember, the ACC is locked into 2036. If the Big Ten and SEC start like in 2030, if the Big Ten is not getting the same kind of money, maybe with what Jim Phillips did, Clemson and FSU and that their ilk and UNC and whatnot, maybe they're going to be happy and the ACC will last longer. We can't use a crystal ball to see what things are going to look like. But if you pay attention to what's going on now, the media world is not as robust as it was a couple years ago. So there is a chance that as much as this looks like you're just giving into those couple schools that really want that big money, you might have set up the ACC for more success. So for a school like BC, who doesn't have a leg to stand on in any of this, they're not a power broker. They're just there. This, I think, is going to be okay. I think my view on this is that things right now are going to be okay. There's 5 years, and with the way things are changing with NIL, the transfer portal, revenue sharing, all that stuff, anything can change between now and then. And it probably will. Something will happen that we're not even talking about right now by 2030. So I'm okay with this. I think I'm happy that Jim Phillips was able to keep the band together, because the last thing that this crew needed was to have them Pac-12 themselves into oblivion, and they didn't. On tomorrow's show, we're going to talk a little bit about recruiting. There's a little news item that should be popping up on Wednesday afternoon that I'm very excited to talk to you guys about. It's not a commitment. I'm going to tell you that now, but I think it's something you guys will like. We'll have more to talk about there. and everything in between here on Locked On Boston College. Follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. Make sure you like and subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. And I'll see you all again tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Boston College, your team every day.